This full moon wants to stretch you. The only question is, will you grip tighter or finally let go? Last month's Scorpio season had some emotional turbulence for a lot of folks, especially that Scorpio new moon a couple weeks ago. That was a real doozy. Scorpio's a water sign. It has a strong reference to the internal and the subjective. So for a lot of folks, last month, the evolutionary lesson was a deep emotional processing time, as well as potential transformation. The energy ebbs and flows. We went through the Scorpio season, a water sign, which is more yin, inward, and reflective in nature, and now we're entering into the Sagittarius season, which is active, dynamic, and fiery. Meanwhile, we have this Gemini full moon. Gemini is an air sign. And fire and air really like each other. It's a kinetic blast of energy. So we take all those insights and reflections that we experienced through the last month and then turn them into conscious action during the Sagittarius season. That's one powerful way to go from Scorpio to Sagittarius in your own personal journey. All planetary events have a spectrum of possibilities and an evolutionary lesson therein. And during this lunation, one primary choice we have is gripping versus flowing. One of the biggest themes in the sky right now is a high degree of mutability. You can see on the screen this beautiful Gemini full moon. It's opposed the Sagittarian sun. We also have Venus in Sag, Mars in Sag. These are all mutable signs. And then we have Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, another water sign. And this links to a grand water trine we also have in the sky right now. So 6 of the 10 planets are all in mutable signs. And then also a very unique feature of this full moon is the full moon is in a very tight, almost exact square to what are called the nodes of the moon, which are the karmic points in our chart. So the evolutionary choice between gripping versus flowing is linked to this idea of mutability. All mutable signs, one of their superpowers is to mutate. It derives from that word, to forever evolve, learn, and grow through that process of ever-changing mutation for our own betterment and evolution. They're all symbols of learning. Stylistically, they all go about it differently. But they are the signs most suited to improvise through life, to go in a lot of different directions, to have a checkered career, quite literally. I mean, I'm a Sagittarius with a Virgo moon. I'm a very mutable person, and I've been a professional poker player. I've been a meditation teacher. I'm an astrologer. I've used to have a computer business. I've been in a lot of different things, and that is the mutable path. So we can adapt and flow, or we can get into the dark side of mutability, which has more of a gripping energy, and this is more connected to themes such as perfectionism and dogmatism, anxiety and control, and we'll understand why more deeply here when we start exploring the signs. Meanwhile, this grand water trine is asking us to soften and release. Mutable signs, again, are highly adaptable and really good at starting a whole lot of projects and not necessarily finishing all of them. And I suppose it's appropriate to be cautious about too much of that in one's life. But in the case of Sag and Gemini specifically, it's like, okay, I finished it with this. It may not feel finished to other people, but it feels finished to me. I think I'll move on to the next thing. And for you, Sag Geminis out there, you can resonate with what I'm saying because these are both symbols of learning. And when we've learned what we've wanted to learn for whenever given subject, we get bored easily and then we move on to the next thing. And that's part of our trajectory in this lifetime. So what does this mean for collective consciousness as we work with this full moon? This is a heightened busyness where here we are for a lot of us in the holiday season. A lot of folks are decorating, we're doing shopping, buying presents, scheduling some social gatherings. So there's just a natural busyness this time of year. And this is perfectly in alignment with the spirit of Gemini Sag. So the suggestion here is to flow instead of grip. Go with the flow, roll with the punches, dart in and out of heavy traffic, not with your hands gripped tightly with the wheel, but through the presence of breath in the present moment. So the art form in this is to embrace the unexpected experiences that come your way. What about the shadow side? Of course, every front has a back. Well, the Gemini shadow is spinning too many plates, chasing your own tail, a dispersal of energy, and this can become exhausting, which is one of the challenges of this month. And this is what gripping energy can look like for mutable energy, especially with Gemini, where we're trying to hold all the threads at once. Now, how do you prevent energetic burnout? Well, this grand water trine is really beautiful here because it invites a certain quietness, a self-healing, an emotional tranquility. This can prevent the burnout. So it's about punctuating those pockets of chaos with pockets of peace. So that's the outer rhythm, busy, flowing, and punctuated by peace. But there's also deep karmic undercurrents during this time. And this is really connected to the fact that, again, these are in a tight square to the nodes of the moon. Now, the nodes spend about 18 and a half months in a given sign combo. So we're roughly just beyond halfway through this cycle here between Virgo Pisces. And the evolutionary astrology perspective on this is we interpret the South Node in Virgo a little bit more negatively, highlighting the shadow side of Virgo, where the collective karma has ripened for us, where we as humanity are trying to grow beyond the darker excesses of shadow side Virgosis and embrace higher octave expression of Pisces. Now, I just want to say clearly, Virgo has a beautiful side, which I won't be saying too much about today. I'm just going to be focusing on the negative side. Not to be negative, but only because that's more useful information in this context. Part of the dark side Virgo is connected to the idea that this is the perfectionist archetype. For you Virgos out there, you know one of your superpowers, which is kind of a double-edged sword, is you have a knack to compare the actual with the ideal. Here is what is, here is what should be. This pervading a lot of your thoughts and or emotions, depending on, where you have Virgo in your chart. The internal translation is, here's what I am, here's what I should be. And this can be highly motivational for you Virgos out there. Better get on with it. But the negative flip side is it's a sign very vulnerable to feelings such as guilt and shame and self-doubt. I'm not good enough, that sort of thing, because perfectionism is an impossible standard. And if you compare yourself to the standard of perfection, you'll always fall short. So perfectionism is a kind of gripping where we're clutching on to an ideal. Now, Virgo, if internalized, expresses itself like that. But if it's externalized on the environment around us, it leads to a very judgmental energy on others. This is why Virgo is the butt of a lot of astrological jokes out there. It's like Virgo is the nitpicker, the shoulda-nator, always in other people's business, telling them what to do, hypercritical. Now, not all Virgos are like that. It's only if they're harnessing the shadow of it and they're externalizing it. However, the origin of them treating other people that way is that that's how they treat themselves. It's a sign very vulnerable to fear consciousness, a bit of a worrywart on the shadow side. So just reflect upon that. How fearful am I this season? Do I have any feelings of judgment towards myself and others? And then think about ways in which you can really help that or dissolve those energies. And I'll give some suggestions, especially when we get to the Pisces North Node, which we might as well do now. Pisces is known as the mystic, the dreamer, the poet, the visionary. At the highest octave, there's really no greater prize if you get it right. We're talking about God consciousness. We're talking about unconditional love, compassion, empathy. These are the high virtues of Pisces. Pisces is the ultimate expression of flowing, surrendering to the current. And this is a beautiful goal, but how do we actually get there? This is where this beautiful grand water trine really becomes our teacher. Now, since this North Node is in Pisces, we look to the other planets in Pisces, Neptune and Saturn, a part of this grand trine. Neptune is said to be the planet that rules Pisces, and whenever a planet's in its own sign, it's at maximum power. So of the whole grand trine, this is really the headliner here because of its association with the North Node sign. And what Neptune and Pisces have in common is that strong link to the mystic. So the goal here is to soften that fear consciousness, to soften that self-judgment or judgment of others through embracing unconditional love and surrender and compassion for other people, their perspectives, and their journey. This is softening. This is flowing. It's releasing the grip of control, which is dark side Virgo. Now, the mystic practice or prescription here would be meditation. And in the case of Saturn in Pisces next to Neptune, it's about consistent meditation practice. And there's many kinds of meditation. Some people do it in the bubble bath. Some people do it hiking. Some people do it rock climbing. Some people do it on the yoga mat or the butt pillow. There's a zillion forms of meditation. Whatever works for you. I've been banging this drum for months, ever since Saturn started conjuncting Neptune. I will continue to bang the drum for the next several months. And whatever works for you, I just recommend leaning into that daily. Whatever's going on with the astrology, whatever's going on in your life, this is really a mainstay. It's like, how can I deepen my own relationship with my spiritual practice? If you want a more specific suggestion to a meditation practice, with us being in this fiery season, with Saturn and Neptune about to return to the fire sign of Aries over the next 14 years, this really emphasizes the spiritual warrior archetype, where people, generally speaking, will get more bang for your buck with spiritual growth through more active, dynamic, etheric, fiery practices or spiritual warrior practices instead of quiet, quiescent, sitting, observing the space between thoughts type of meditation, which have their place too, don't get me wrong. But when we're talking about the spiritual warrior theme, it is more about working with the energy body directly. And there's many different techniques that focus on that. I recommend Qigong. I'll put a link below to a level 1 set from a legitimate Chinese master, very powerful teachings. Or I also train people one-on-one through what's called my consciousness coaching package through my website. I'll put a link below. So deepening one's spiritual practice, Pisces style, is the direct, easy, flowing antidote to the darker excesses of Virgo, which is about judgment, an extension of egoism and pride, which only leads to resentment and contempt and sometimes hatred if that judgment is allowed expression hundreds, if not thousands of times, whether pointed at oneself or others. So spirituality is really key here. But returning back to the Gemini moon, okay, it is a very chaotic sign. It's a very chaotic month. So again, it's about embracing this go with the flow spirit to stay busy, to get stuff done, to ride the wave, and to really lean into what I consider to be Gemini's greatest gift, which is, and you Geminis out there will know what I'm talking about, your insatiable curiosity. Okay, now not everybody I'm talking to here is a Gemini, of course, right? But leaning into that level of consciousness, that very specific emotional state. And we've all experienced curiosity. That's why we can relate to these archetypes. It's just some illustrate this principle more than others. So being more aware about that which you're curious about, that I call it a little soul tickle, that little shiver up and down your spine, that great interest. It's like, it's an emotional whisper, it's very playful. What makes you curious right now? What haven't you sunk your teeth into yet? These are good questions to ask. There's a great book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, which for you artists out there, that's probably one of my highest recommended books for you to read. And it's also statistically the book most likely to, an artist for an artist to buy, and then for the artist never to do it and it to just collect dust on the shelf, because there's this procrastination, there's resistance to even do this book because it opens up so much vulnerability and creative energy. But one of the main prescriptions Julia gives in that book is to take yourself out on what she called an artist play date once a week, I think is what it was. And, not all of you are interested in becoming an artist, but that's still a useful prescription during this month. Is like, what am I curious about? Is there something new that I could sink my teeth into? Because Gemini and Sagittarius are about new experiences, not, been there, done that sort of thing. So, I think it would be really interesting. I'm curious to go to this art gallery a town over. They have a show going on. And then you just go. You go during this full moon, and you'll have insights. You'll have new sensory experience, and it will ever so slightly shift your perception of reality through these new experiences and create and keep your creative well quite full. So is there something new and exciting that I'm curious about that I can go do during this full moon? Or again, the full moon phase is about 4 days after the technical full moon. So you have a few days of room there. Even if it's alone, go do it. Have some fun. It's interesting because it reconnects you to a beautiful Gemini energy, which is wonder, amazement, shock, and surprise. And it ignites a certain enlivened consciousness, which is the evolutionary goal. So during the busyness of this month, instead of allowing yourself to get pulled in a zillion different directions, and again, keep in mind, this is a generalization. I'm speaking to a very wide audience here. Mileage may vary. But for those of you who feel like you're getting pulled in so many different directions, focus your consciousness and find that Geminian charge, that curiosity, that amazement, that wonder in life, and allow that to be the North Star that guides your life. Allow that to be your compass. That is that more flowing state. Whereas the obligations and the shoulds, pulling you everywhere, that's more gripping. Circling back to Sagittarius, we do have 3 planets in this sign. We have Sun, Venus, and Mars. And again, they're in a tight square to this Virgo South node. So we talked about that Virgoan judgment pattern. Well, here it is again. We can apply it to dark side Sag for a moment. And, dark side Sag, since it's linked to religion and what I call the preacher archetype, it's the sign most vulnerable to dogmatism and preaching, a certain ideological certainty about what reality is. And during the Sagittarian season, people, more than what would be considered normal, become a little bit drunk on their own religions. And that's not only about God. Many people are religious about their political views these days. I'm sure you've noticed that. And whenever we have fixed ideation combined with righteous indignation and pride and anger and rage and even fear, that gets projected outwardly in this sort of religious zealotry or warfare, which is the dark side of the god of war in the sign of religion, Mars and Sag. Now, healthy Gemini counterbalances the excesses of dark Sag, okay? Because of all the signs, this is another superpower of Gemini. They're known as typically the most open-minded of all the signs in the zodiac, because at its very core, besides just being the talking sign or the communication sign, at its very core, it's the sign of perception. And that is one of the primary evolutionary goals when working with Gemini archetypes in one's life, is to perceive reality more clearly. So a good question to ask, and this is a more Sagittarian question, what do I believe? And then to reflect deeply upon those beliefs. And then the follow-up is, well, how dogmatic am I about these beliefs? And to really be honest with yourself about that. And then ask yourself, do I judge those not in alignment with these beliefs? So dogma is fixed. It's gripping. Curiosity is flowing. It's open. There's some beautiful Geminian mantras or affirmations to use really over the next week or two, which is, whatever I believe reality to be, it's not quite that. I'm open to being stretched. I'm open to explore. I'm open to seek more wonder, amazement, shock, and surprise. I'm open to have the rug pulled out from underneath me from time to time as far as my understanding goes. Now, that was a long mantra. You can kind of break it up, but that's really the spirit of it. Dark side Sag is certain it has all the answers. High, virtuous Gemini is much more about embracing questions to subvert those answers. So ask yourself as many questions as you can this month that invite deeper levels of reflection about what it is you believe. So let's bring it all together. This Gemini full moon is just teeming with mutable energy. It's adaptable, it's improvisational, and yes, a bit chaotic. The invitation is to just try to flow with it, not fight it, lean into the busyness, dart through the traffic, roll with the unexpected. But as you do that, also watch for the shadow, spinning too many plates, perfectionism, whether aimed at yourself or others, dogma dressed up as righteousness. These are all forms of gripping. And the antidote lives in this grand water trine as we try to punctuate the chaos with pockets of stillness, soften the judgment, develop a daily meditation practice, however that looks for you. This is how you release the grip. And when you feel that whisper of curiosity, that soul tickle, follow it wherever it leads you. Take yourself on an adventure. Ask better questions. Stay open to having the rug pulled out from underneath you in terms of your certainties. And remember, whatever you believe reality to be, it's not quite that. 1. Notice where you're gripping. Perfectionism, worry, judgment, dogma. Name it. Then practice softening. 2. Commit to a daily practice, even for 5 minutes. Saturn conjunct Neptune is asking for you to have more discipline in your spiritual life. So answer the call. 3, follow your curiosity wherever it leads you. Not obligation, not shoulds, genuine curiosity, and let that be your compass through the chaos. 4, hold your beliefs lightly. Ask yourself, how dogmatic am I? And be honest. And 5, when you encounter difficulty in others, meet it with steady hands and a calm voice, not with reactivity, but with compassionate presence, and be the shelter, not the storm. This is the core work. Flow, don't grip. Soften, don't harden. Wonder, don't conclude. These are the core evolutionary intentions, with the goal being to expand our consciousness. Thanks for watching.